can practically see it from here.
What?
Home.
The call went out.
We have to go to Dunkirk.
You know where we're going? Into war, George.
I'll be useful, sir.
We need to destroy it.
There's no hiding from this, son. We have a job to do.
Where are we going?
Dunkirk.
You may have seen this past summer's film, Dunkirk. Dunkirk is a seaport in the north of France, located on the English Channel near the border with Belgium. In May of 1940, in the wake of the recent advance by German forces, Allied French, Belgian, and British forces had all retreated to the area around the beaches at Dunkirk, where they remained holed up, awaiting evacuation by the sea across the Channel to safety in England. On land, they were surrounded. There was no escape. All 350,000 of them faced potentially impossible odds. The problem was that their number was far greater than what all available Royal Navy vessels could accommodate in the operation. Exactly how long they could hold their position was uncertain. Just beyond the outskirts of the city, tanks of Germany's Armored Panzer Division stood ready, awaiting final orders to move in. On the beaches, everybody knew that if this were to happen, any prognosis in the way of results could only be at best bleak. Quite surely, it was an example of between the devil and the deep blue sea, or in Spanish, entre la espada y la pared. As they stood their ground, a cryptic radio message was transmitted back to London. It contained only 3 words, but if not. Out of context, so much like the languages we teach, these 3 words all by themselves really do not make a whole lot of sense. They could mean anything. However, at the time, much of England was biblically literate. Furthermore, on the home front, many had kept abreast of developments with the situation just across the Channel. In response, a national day of prayer was declared, on which the whole country, including King George VI himself, gathered to do so in their respective churches and synagogues. In Westminster Abbey, the Archbishop of Canterbury led prayers for their soldiers in dire peril in France. In this context, upon learning of the transmission of these 3 words from Dunkirk, everybody fully understood the significance of "but if not." It was a reference from chapter 3 of the book of Daniel. It was in this chapter that King Nebuchadnezzar had ordered built outside the city of Babylon a statue. It was as tall as a 9-story building and plated with gold. After its completion, the king brought in for its dedications thousands of officials from all over the Babylonian Empire. As music started to play, every one of them was commanded to bow down and worship this statue. However, within this great multitude, there were 3 young Hebrews by the name of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who refused to do this. they so refused out of faithfulness to God and in obedience to him according to the commandment in Exodus 24. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. For this they were squealed on, apparently by some jealous astrological seers. Right then and there, they were brought before King Nebuchadnezzar himself, who demanded, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you are refusing to serve my gods or to worship the gold statue I set up? I'll give you one more chance. When the music plays, if you fall down and worship the statue, all will be well. But if you refuse, you will be thrown into the flaming furnace within the hour, and what God can deliver you out of my hands then?" To this they responded, "If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God who we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But if not, but even if he does not," in the Aramaic of the original text, what they actually said translates to something along the lines of, "But even if it's clear to us that it's probably not going to happen, we want you to know, Your Majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold which you have set up." In reaction, we might say today that the king went totally ballistic. He probably forgot all royal protocol and started acting totally savage. Right there in front of thousands of officials, he ordered for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to be thrown into the blazing furnace. All three were bound, still fully dressed, including the turbans on their heads. The furnace was heated to 7 times hotter than usual. Because the king's command was so urgent, some of the soldiers actually responsible for checking them in were killed instantly by flames shooting out right as the door to the furnace was open. And by the way, children, here we might even have a scripture reference for why the fire department always says, "Never open a door if it feels hot." But anyway, how did Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego feel about all this? They were probably terrified, but they had probably resigned themselves that they were about to die with some horribly severe third-degree burns to be suffered along the way. Nonetheless, they were going to stand firm for God. Why? Because he is good. Because he is love. He desires the very best of what is good for those who choose to seek him. As Paul later wrote in Romans 8:18, they knew that no matter how things would end for them right then, the sufferings of the present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that is to be revealed. So they casted their cares upon him because they knew he cared for them. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would not compromise their commitment to the Lord. Live or die, they would be faithful to their God. But if not, as they heard these words, the people on the home front in England understood the dire gravity of the situation facing their troops on the beaches in France as they stood firm. Hitler was, at least at that moment, successfully attempting to impose what amounts to tyranny on Europe and indeed the world. In the name of God, our troops are standing firm to the end, even if it means death or capture. And so shall we. In your name, Lord, what would you have us do? At Dunkirk, as with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, probably no one had a clue as to the final outcome. However, in both cases, the Lord affirmed who he is, but clearly in a way worthy of glory to his name. With Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, it was clearly a miracle. Into the raging inferno of the furnace, Nebuchadnezzar looked in after them. To his amazement, he saw not 3 men, but 4. The 4th one looked like a son of God. In spite of the burning fury all around them, they were all unbound and completely unscathed. He subsequently released them. And though the king had seen a miracle, he did not pledge personal allegiance to God. He did, however, right then decree throughout his empire that God was to at least be respected by all. The Dunkirk evacuation was not a miracle quite to this extent, but consider some other things which happened at the same time. On the first full day of the evacuation, the Royal Navy had 1 cruiser, 8 destroyers, and 26 other craft active. In response to the but if not transmission, the British Admiralty called on all English citizens with seaworthy vessels to lend their ships to an evacuation effort. Within only a matter of hours, several hundred civilian small craft had mobilized. The boats were of every kind imaginable, from fishing boats and yachts to ferries and commercial freighters. It was initially estimated that with only 1 day to evacuate, that only 45,000 personnel would make it to safety. Calm waters allowed the evacuation fleet to make a quicker escape. Low cloud cover aided RAF fighter pilots in holding at bay the planes of the Luftwaffe, which had to fly in over greater distances from airfields in Germany. To this day, it is not known exactly as to why Hitler had ordered the halt of the Armored Panzer Division outside Dunkirk. Again, had they attacked, it would have certainly sealed the final fate of the forces on the beaches. But as a result, along with the weather and the assistance of all the civilian craft, the operation was actually accomplished in 9 days with some 350,000 plus Allied troops all rescued. Looking at the timing of it all, I find it hard not to conclude that the sovereign hand of the Lord was clearly at work. As with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, he was affirming who he is, but clearly in a way worthy of glory to his name. Even as they stood firm, placing their trust in him, even under circumstances in which it might have been understandable had they not. How about you? Perhaps you're dealing with a situation in which you are being pressured. Perhaps it has to do with something you either know for a fact is not true, or on which you do not have enough information in order to make a wise determination. Especially if what's being pushed is more for the sake of expediency, or perhaps how things should look on the surface versus addressing the overall reality of what's actually at the heart of the matter. Perhaps you overhear one of your students making a bitingly sarcastic remark to another. And though it doesn't quite justify sending that student to see the principal, it still has the potential to be hurtful. And you, as the teacher, have to address it. Even if it results in you getting called an aguafiestas party pooper who is not very con la onda or with it. Perhaps it's a philosophical trend in current educational or linguistic research. Perhaps it's a popular instructional approach, a highly fashionable paradigm on the contemporary educational bandwagon. And you are facing strong encouragement and even pressure to incorporate it into your curriculum and apply it in your classroom. And yet, within it, you sense something amiss. And for you to support it, at least to the letter, would be against your convictions, convictions which you hold quite deeply, convictions on which to compromise as such would mean, at least for you, going along with something that is not after God's heart, because it accommodates elements which Scripture teaches as sin. Yet to stand in opposition could come at a cost, even if you nothing more than respectfully disagree. Even that might mean rejection, ridicule, or perhaps even intimidation. What do? Stand firm. As Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and also the British soldiers at Dunkirk, stand firm. Particularly if the example you set in so standing serves to others as a reminder and even an encouragement that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who seek him. Because the sufferings of the present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that is to be revealed. You just never know how God might come through, affirming who he is, but clearly in a way worthy of glory to his name. Because he is good, because he is love. He desires the very best of what is good for those who choose to seek him. He gave us Jesus, in whom we are saved by grace through faith. That's the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Jesus, in whom we are his children, who we have become by receiving him, by believing in his name. So you're being told that all kinds of terrible things are going to happen if you stand firm. Think it over. How much credible substance is there to what you're being told? Especially as you consider other factors involved. How unwise would it really be on your part if you were to call their bluff? On the other hand, wisely remember that you really are the only one who could possibly know the answer to this question, depending on the specifics of your situation. Think it over. But also consider the point behind why we are called to teach. Remember, it's not merely about equipping our learners to communicate in Spanish or French or Chinese or whatever. It's about being a role model, most especially so as a witness for Christ. Whatever example you set for them today is who they will be tomorrow. As you endeavor to set it, which choice is ultimately in their best interest? even if it happens to be at a cost, at least initially. Stand firm, as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and also the British soldiers at Dunkirk. Because you just never know how God might come through, affirming who he is, but clearly in a way worthy of his